The Sporlan division of Parker Hannifin proudly sponsors the Advanced Refrigeration Podcast. Contaminants like water, acids, sludges, and varnishes may react with compressor windings, leading to compressor burnout or cause copper plating, which reduces bearing clearances, or poor valve seating, eventually causing failure. Or they can deposit in the expansion device, restricting flow or proper modulation of thermostatic expansion valves. Loss of superheat control will lead to lack of cooling if the evaporator is starved, or even worse, flooding of liquid back to the compressor, causing bearing washout and eventual compressor failure. Installing a properly sized, high-quality, time-proven Sporlan catch-all will ensure contaminants are captured before they can harm the new system components. Ask your local refrigeration wholesaler about the Sporlan catch-all filters. Parker Sporlan, leading the charge.
It'll make all the U.S. people happy.
You make my life difficult when you do that.
But we could leave it, and we could make every other OEM in the U.S. happy.
Absolutely horrible. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Advanced Refrigeration Podcast. You're the host, Brett Wetzel and Kevin Compass. How you doing, buddy? You look angry tonight.
Not a good day. It's been a bit of a shit show since the beginning. People forgetting about startups that need to get done and showing up, and just dealing with electricians that have been hosing me all week.
Where's all the other startup guys?
They're all doing an EMS project right now. I'm basically on Solo Island, and this is the busiest we've been since COVID. And we ripped all the salad bars out, and this is ridiculous. I'm doing like 4 or 5 startups a day. I was this morning putting cases in and dealing with that and trying to get all the sensors fixed, the 8 islands that they crisscrossed all the sensors on, and then dealing with another Amazon store where they changed a bunch of cases, and then all the case controllers are different. So I had to delete everything, and I had to program in the new case controller version type and deal with all that, and then try to verify all the case temp sensors by myself. And then I went to my nightmare Sam's Club job.
Yeah.
And I went to go start up a couple cases and realized the electrician screwed a bunch of stuff up. And I went to go see why a coffin case didn't have voltage at it for defrost. And I dropped the pan down, and it exploded in my face.
Sweet.
Yeah. And then I turn around, and the CO2 rack is like getting warmer and warmer. I'm like, oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Look over, and then carrier CO2 racks down yet again.
I hate you. I was at Rita this week. I saw the industrial folk.
Playing with those Polestar compressors and 1912 steam engines.
It's not true. The one guy was having a discussion, and it sounded good when he started discussing it. Because he was talking about liquid pump overfeeder, and he was like, "Yeah, there's a way to get rid of the pumps." And so he didn't have any like illustrations up there while he was discussing it. And he's like, "Yeah, we pull the pumps out," and I'm like, I'm trying to figure out what the hell he's doing. And then I was drawing it up, and then I showed him the picture I drew. He's like, "No, it goes from the high pressure to the low pressure." I was like, "So it's regular DX." Like he's trying to not make it like 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 overfeed, right? He's basically trying to limit that by regulating what the pressure is from the inlet to the outlet of the coil, like putting pressure transducers on there, and just trying to limit the amount of pressure difference, right? So you actually are superheating on the way back. And that's fine and all, but that's not overfeed. He's like, "Yeah, we just try to maintain it like at zero, I think he said 0 PSI or 1 PSI or something like that, whatever it is, because you have the line feeding down is going to have more pressure, right? I think it's like, I don't know, half a pound for every foot of run that's there or something like that for the weight of column of liquid or whatever. And then after he actually explained it, I was like, that's DX. He was using high pressure liquid, filling up the cylinder up at the top, letting that run down, and then going over to the low temp suction. So I was like, that's DX. And then he's, oh yeah, then we have to put a distributor on it. Excuse me. And I was figuring you would, because it's not going to feed evenly, right? You're going to have more weight on the bottom of the pipe than you would at the top. You'd have this weird feed pattern, right? Just didn't make any sense. Not at all. For what he was explaining. And then I'm trying to finish up this presentation for NASRC because I was up to 96 slides and that just wasn't going to go well. Only having an hour and a half to talk. Yeah, I just went overboard. But then I got down this rabbit hole because I know Microthermal has a thing where I was putting up together stuff for graphs, but then I was also putting together stuff for some of the HPV and BGV alarms, right? You know, low flash tank pressure, high flash tank pressure, and stuff like that. And then I started looking into the high gas cooler, and I was trying to figure out what shuts off, and it just basically runs the same until it runs like a really high set point, and then it shuts it down. But then having a discussion with someone, I realized that they usually, or what they're supposed to do is if it hits an alarm on the rack, it's not supposed to just shut off altogether all the way. Even the E3 has it, and I found it today. I was going to show you this. I didn't know if you've ever seen this before. You probably did, but you're going to be like, oh, I've seen it before. But I was surprised when I saw it, and I just wanted to show it to you. In the CO2 suction group, this over here, in the CO2 suction group, you have two potential discharge pressures that you can trip out on. So the first one you can do is a critical, and I set that one for 1500. Oh, wait a minute. Is that nope, that's the one. So this one I set for 1500, and the other one I set for 1550. So 1550 was essentially like the full shutdown. And then if you look underneath here, high pressure discharge trip, I named it limited. And then what it'll do is it'll actually start staging off some of the compressors. Like it'll.
Yeah, MT does the same thing.
Well, and that's where someone said it to me, and I was like, oh, I wonder if it's capable of doing it through the iPro, sending a signal. But I don't have an iPro license for this yet, so I couldn't do it that route. So I was like, all right, let me look in the suction and see if there's something there, and there was. So you can basically, it'll start backing off some of the load as long as it's not in compressor on delay. It'll start backing off some of the load.
So one thing I will say is we don't get it super hot here, not like where you live where it's disgusting all year round.
Yeah.
I've been backing off the high pressure set point to 1,400 pounds. So it tries to not maintain a set point higher than 1,400. Because I've seen sites where it goes all the way to 1,500. Mm-hmm. And then if it's sitting, it won't restart. Especially if the sensor's on the roof, it won't restart.
Oh, because it's sitting.
Well, it sets the pressure so high for the set point,
mm-hmm.
and then you have the fan delay for it to come on, and by the time the compressors hit, like the high pressure valve doesn't open fast enough, and it just starts this like vicious cycle. That I am 100% dead nuts on the sensor for the suction or for the gas cooler control and HPV control should be at the rack, insulated inside the rack panel for that simple fact, because I've seen it so many times when it's on a roof and it's getting all the heat from the roof on it, bake it on the Armaflex or the cladding, and when it goes to restart, it will not restart sometimes
because the temperature's already high up, right?
Yeah, it's already high up, and you won't get that flow. You need that flow to get the temperature cool down. Without that flow, you get nothing. I am diehard. It racks where the sensor is at the rack or inside the rack panel, inside like the enclosed rack. It's less of an issue. You get a little bit of convection off the flash tank when it's sitting, so it cools it down a little more. That way, you don't have that big of an issue. But I hate the sensors right out of the gas cooler.
And it also makes sense because Vine and I were having a discussion about this, and I was like, it should be wherever you have the pressure transducer, that's where you should also have the temperature sensor. Because if you have the temperature sensor all the way up, you're not getting the true blue subcooling that it's actually reading because the pressure drop in the pipe in that.
100%.
So you're going to have
the pressure drop is going to be much, but still, it's 100%. It's not true blue correct. Everybody says it has to be 6 inches out of the gas cooler outlet. I'm here to tell you, I've moved them and seen zero difference in performance.
Trying to find my thing that you were making fun of me for.
Oh yeah.
I made a picture of just a piece of insulation that you could actually see through because I was just trying to show the spec. And Kevin's, you spent all the time to make this little pipe so you can actually see the actual sensor. I think it looks nice. I don't know. But no, I get what you're saying. And I agree with you. Especially I can see like in Texas, it would be just uply horrible. What do you see in the high pressure settings set for up in Chicago there?
Shut off?
Yeah.
1500 to 1550.
Okay.
You don't see them get higher than that. Like, and to be honest, the mechanicals lock out before the EMS does anyway, because those things always drift. No. I don't care whose it is. If it's the Serta ones or the Emerson ones, like it's a super high pressure range, so it's not going to be like extremely accurate.
2%. I don't know what the thing of error is, but even if it's 2% at its full range, that's still a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. A lot of times, like if it does get super hot and you go to restart these and can't get them to restart, sometimes you may have to shut the rack off to let the TC side reset.
That was the other thing too. So when I was going through, because this is what I was trying to figure out when I was going through this stuff, I was going through some of the set points trying to figure out blah, 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 blah. I'm almost done, but I just got to reorganize everything. But there was the settings I was going through. Oh, it's going to be on the high gas cooler one. There. It was. Nope. Damn it, I can't find it now. Oh, this guy. Because there was, no, I must have not put it in there. But anyway, so there was one portion where it was showing where there's two different alarms. The one where it won't allow it to get any more higher than the max. It's not supposed to, but if it does, then what it's actually doing is shutting down the HPV down to a minimum percentage. So I thought if you had that set for the same pressure at which, like, set them both for 1500 for the discharge trip, where it starts staging down, then you're at least staging down the compressor while you're closing that off to a minimum position, whatever that might be on the HPV set in the iPro. And then if you get up to the 1550, and then that way, hopefully you won't have everything entirely shut down. You might still have the VFD compressor running, would be the hope. And then you still have the little bit of flow, so you wouldn't be totally boned on what it's trying to do and what it's trying to accomplish.
Then the train whistles start whistling.
That's not the hope. We're hoping not to do that. But anywho.
All right, so let's talk about what I've been seeing a lot and what me and you were talking about the other day. So liquid coming off the flash gas bypass valve.
Yeah.
Now, we've had a discussion about this, me and you, and some theory and why it does it. And there's other reasons it happens, but let's get into the meat and potatoes of why you're seeing it.
Okay.
Now, this isn't going to be every single situation. There is going to be times where you do get wet liquid coming off the flash tank. It's unavoidable. It's always an issue with the superheat rejection. I will say this, though. I am starting to like the racks with the heat exchanger for the flash gas to discharge. I think that works way better than hot gas injection. If they're taking the medium temp suction through a heat exchanger and using a three-way valve to run discharge gas through it, works so much better. And it de-superheats it, but helps it run less transcritical.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a way better method than hot gas injection. Because hot gas injection, you're getting nothing.
Say that one more time.
They're taking discharge gas and running it through the medium temp suction, through heat exchanger.
Discharge gas, right? Oh, okay. I understand.
So they're running them counterflow. You got suction going one way, discharge gas going the other way, and they're using that to superheat the medium temp. But at the same time, it's de-superheating the low or the discharge gas. So you get a little bit more out of it instead of just dumping discharge gas into the suction.
Of course. I'm looking. Sorry.
Or Jamie, I thought you would have had this set up.
You know what? I was actually cooking for my kids. Sorry. It's not my fault. I gotta go through here because I got 20 different copies of the same fucking file. Because every single time something happens, it resets, and then all of a sudden now it goes back to autosave.
Do you want to pause it so you don't have to edit so much out?
Yeah. I'm getting there. All right.
One eternity later.
All right, so let me bring this up now, and now I can finagle this. All right, yes, enthalpy chart. Yay, everyone's like, please don't do this.
Boring.
No, I know.
Church it up.
Church it up. You're going to get me fired. Anyway, all right, so if anyone doesn't know, these lines right here are saturation lines. So if you follow these lines down, here's your 20-degree mark from meow to meow. And then what you're supposed to do is then follow that up from wherever you're at to basically get to what temperature you're going to do. Like when you're plotting these, first thing you're going to do is plot your first line on the saturation line. Let's do a saturation of 20 since that's what we're all accustomed to. And then from meow to here would basically be how much superheat that you have. And to figure that out, so if you're 20 degrees saturated, on the transcritical compressors, we want 20 degrees of superheat. So then you're going to bring this down to the 40-degree line. So if you follow this line down, it circles over. So by getting this right here, now essentially you're at 20 degrees saturated, and now you're at 20 degrees of superheat being at that line right there. Now, the next line that you would plot would be basically your increase of temperature for your compressor. So that's going to be based off of basically what your ambient is, right? So whatever line we're going to do. Are we going to do transcritical first, or are we going to
do 90 like the rest of the country and unlike that hellhole you live in?
All right. So we'd go up to 90 degrees, which means we'd probably be somewhere right above transcritical. So we're going to be right above the dome here. And so I'm going to copy another line here. And typically you'd get probably somewhere in the wheelhouse of about, I don't know, probably about 200 degrees was probably the average of what we get as far as the discharge temperature. So we can bring that right in the middle there. And then this would be where your gas cooler is. Notice how it's above the bubble. So if we're above the bubble, we're transcritical, which means we are doing no condensing, hence why we need our PV in order to bring that pressure down. We're basically faking out the pressure in order to get it down within the bubble. So if we're at that temperature and you said we want to get to a 90-degree gas cooler outlet, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
All right. So then we go in between these two lines, right? Meow. So there's your 80, there's your 100, which means we're going to paste another line here. Take this, do a Rigma rollover, and this is going to go straight down, but we're not going to go straight down right into our suction line, because remember that's basically going to go down to where our where our flash tank is going to be. So typical flash tank, you just want to do 40 degrees, so it's nice and easy. Yes, no, maybe 40.
Yeah.
40 degrees saturated. All right. So then 40 degrees saturated. I'm gonna have to shrink that line up a little bit. And typically your expansion valve will be like on the cusp, because we really don't get any subcooling coming out of there, out of our flash tank. It's barely saturated. So right now we're right about here. And so the only other line that we would need at that point is to connect these two. Paste that line here. So that's where our evaporation process happens on the actual line there. So if anyone doesn't know, this side is liquid on this side, or vapor on this side. And then what I'll do is I'll just make another copy of this over here. And this little line right here is going to be your line for where essentially what your BGV is doing, right? Actually, that needs to be right just about to the edge there. So for all those who are asking about the liquid being created, so the higher of a pressure drop you have, the more more liquidy vapor you're going to get going over to your suction, which is going into your compressor. So just to explain this a little bit easier. Copy. Control C. So just so you understand, your evaporation is happening right here. Your little flashy gas for your evaporators hanging out right there. Your flash tank's right here. Your HPV is what's dropping your pressure down from what there is. This essentially would be your gas cooler. Now, if this line was subcritical, it would be down here, and so we would be more in the bubble, so we would be able to actually subcool it. And then this is where your compressor is, and then this would be where your BGV would be.
And
So,
God forbid anybody makes a straight picture of a condenser.
You're right. Listen, I bitched about this to you the one day, and you're like, oh, rah, 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 and then like you started doing some of this stuff too, and you're like, I can't find a single condenser or receiver for that matter that's straight. Even compressors, because they're always on a fucking angle. You can never get a shot of strictly the back end. I was having to find ones that you could actually rotate and then screenshot it real quick and then run it through the thing that we do. Anyway.
Today's episode is sponsored by the RefraShield RDP Series differential pressure monitors from Westermeyer Industries, now available for transcritical CO2 systems in addition to other common pressures and refrigerants. When the filter element of your coalescing oil separator is contaminated, it can hurt your system's performance and efficiency. But how do you know when it's time to replace that filter? Wait too long to replace, and you could end up with a nasty filter blowout. But replacing too often can be a waste of time and money. The answer is installing a differential pressure monitor. The RDP series differential pressure monitors, including the new transcritical CO2 model, are available now from Westermeyer Industries. To find out more information, email sales@westermeyerin.com. That's WESTERMEYERIN.com.
So you can see right into here, there's a little bit of a gap in between here. So there's the more of the gap, the more liquidy shit you're going to have. So example, if I were to then take this line and instead of having, I don't know, instead of doing 50 degree or 30 degree, no,
you did 40, which is
40.
not usually common. So do 55.
All right, so 55. Give me a pressure that's going to be that then, so I know where to
Oh
put
my God. Hold on.
Do you want me to do everything? Unbelievable.
Yeah, because I've had to do everybody else's job today. 1 second, I'm looking.
Yep.
Fire up the Sporlan app, and then I gotta scroll through 900 numbers because this is so high.
It should be starred.
No, to get to 55.
Oh, gotcha.
55 is, hold on, 56. Jesus, so much. 84 pounds. It's an odd number.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a different color so we can keep track of this. So instead of having the, what'd you say, 685?
Yeah.
So this would be like 700-ish, right about meow. So I move that line over yonder. Straighten that up. Move that out of the way right now. And then I'll copy this line. Copy. Paste it. And I'll change that the same color, blue. And then you'll see what's going on here. Okay. So as you can see now, there's more of a gap with where the blue line is going straight down over here versus when we had the little itty bitty gap. Usually this bottom line is either in kilojoules if you're speaking with anyone from South Africa.
The fuck is a kilojoule?
I don't know. Some Doc Brown was talking about. Anyway, when I was trying to, because I was trying to figure this out the one night. It was bothering me. I was up till 1 o'clock in the morning, and there's like either a 7 or 11 hour difference between here and SA. So finally, like I saw the guy go green. I was like, good, he's up. And it was in the middle of the night for me, almost morning. And so I went through this with him because it was bothering me because I kept making enthalpy charts trying to figure out where it was coming from. So anyway, coming down here, we got 180 BTUs per pound. And so to get over to the vapor line here, you would essentially have to then, I don't know, probably maybe add like 10 BTUs per pound of energy in order to fully evaporate that. That's typically why it's good to have a heat exchanger there, where if you have less of a pressure drop, right, you're not going to create so much liquid. Now, even if, like you said, if we were to take this line down to what it typically is, right, and move it down to here a little bit lower, because usually we're about 500 pounds, right? And if you were to take this line and move it down and move it over, it's even the less amount of gap right where that vapory dome part is, right? So it's not much energy in order to, change that CO2 directly in all to vapor. And so that's what's actually happening. So the more of a gap that you have here from where this line goes at the end of the dome down to where it's going down to your saturated, that's the more potential that you have for it to basically have a little bit of liquidy vapor in there. And so the more pressure drop that you would have, the more of a heat exchanger that you'd have to have in order to boil off that refrigerant, so you're not chucking that liquidy refrigerant all the way over to your compressors.
Now, when he's saying pressure drop, he means you got flash tank and then suction. So you're always going to have a pressure drop there, always.
Correct.
So if your suction's running 400 pounds and your flash tank's running 500 pounds, that's 100 pounds of differential pressure drop.
Mm-hmm.
If it's 550, that's 150 pounds. So then that's almost doubling the pressure drop. It doesn't take much to get up to 550 either. If your flash tank's hunting a little bit, if you're having some control issues, it doesn't take much. So that's why when you see that flash tank hunting, you're increasing that pressure differential. That's when you're going to start seeing this liquid start popping up, and you start getting some wet vapor coming out of the flash tank. So that's why flash tank control is extremely important with this, because if you guys don't keep good flash tank control, that's when you start getting this wet superheated liquid or non-superheated liquid. So
it's like basically saturated vapor, really saturated vapor.
That's like what the laydown receivers, it's even worse because you have less space to make up for it. So the laydown receiver, you have less of a gap between, so it makes it even worse. So it's picking up even more from there.
Yeah, so to put it in perspective, they would end up having, if this was a heat exchanger instead of an evaporator, it's my spinning evaporator. If you would put basically a heat exchanger in between here, then this line would essentially go superheated over, and then you're basically boiling off whatever is in there in order so you don't get that wet vapor going into your compressor. And it's this gap right in here. There's not barely any shit for gap over here, but now from going over for where the dome is, you have all this gap here, which means I would have to have X amount of BTUs per pound going through that heat exchanger in order to boil off any of that refrigerant to get it totally superheated.
See, I'm to the point now where I think hot gas injection is bullshit.
Why?
I do. It's a waste. And then the advancer racks, the solenoid's too small. Under a heavy load, it really doesn't do much. The zero zone racks is like the Rack Blaster 5000. It'll heat it up and it does a good job, but it's a waste of energy. I would rather see a heat exchanger on there instead of like a brazed plate heat exchanger taking the brunt of that.
Is it though? Because then you're dropping your head pressure, right? You're dropping your head pressure. There is some savings there, but unless it's feeding all the time. If you could get it to a point where it would probably be even better than just using a solenoid, is using an actual,
it would probably give you much better control.
Absolutely. And then you could
I would like to see the low temp suction ran through there, or low temp discharge, but then you risk
cooking it,
superheating the low temp suction or low temp discharge, and then making liquid that way. So rob Peter to pay Paul. If you're using discharge gas from the TC compressors, it would work, but now you're talking a pretty good sized heat exchanger to pull that off.
Yeah, so if you were to
maybe take the lead compressor and run it through there, the VFD compressor.
Yeah. So what you would have to do is, if you were to put this little heat exchanger, it's so small. Essentially, the line would then go over because you're adding heat to it at that point. But then how are you adding the heat, right? So you could either add the heat by taking this line right here, going into the flash tank over to here, right? And then you'd be basically, this line would probably move over that away.
I don't like when they do that, because a lot of, like, Carnot did it for a while. They would run a heat exchanger from drop leg to medium temp suction. They did the medium temp suction, not just the flash gas line, but that's fine and dandy when it's 90 degrees outside and you have a little more load. It does decent. But when you are 50 outside and you still have some, so at times taking some wet vapor off there, it doesn't do shit, because you're only picking up like 20 degrees.
You'd have to actually do it's just sensible heat, right? That's all you're really doing.
It's so much less efficient.
Yeah, because you're liquid to gas at that point, so you're not really doing much anything. But then, like you said, if you put too much in there, you run the risk, especially if it's on the low temp, you run the risk of over superheating your suction line and just killing the hell out of your compressor.
Let me tell you, I did that on a zero zone rack one time, and it was like one of the first racks I seen with a de-superheating loop in the gas cooler. And holy shit.
Yeah.
I have never seen flood back come back. It was 10 degrees outside. And the three-way valve was wired backwards. I have never seen flood back hit a compressor, like the medium temp suction, so hard. It was so violent coming off. It was pure liquid coming off the roof.
TC? Was it TC?
No, it was the subcritical side. It was the low temp compressors, but they went to a three-way valve where it either went into the medium temp suction or it went up to the roof in a loop in the gas cooler.
Oh, okay. I've seen that on the Cascades.
Yeah. So it had a de-superheating loop, and then it came down and just hammered those compressors.
All right, so we good on that? Because then I was going to discuss the other thing that I was trying to figure out today.
Yep.
Cool. So I'm going to get rid of the blue line. So we don't need the blue line anymore. Get out of here. Bye, blue line. Someone's probably watching this, taking notes. How much you want to fucking bet?
I know one person that is.
Anywho, so it really depends on where your line ends up. So the closer the closer you are to this line, the more liquid you're creating. The farther away from the line, the less. Because you remember how I said you and Joe were making fun of me when I said this, but basically this is your tax over here, right? Just like this over here, that's also your tax. Anything, in this little triangle here is your tax. So the more you move this line over is the less tax that you have. And how that actually is debated on, so it's whatever your outlet of your gas cooler is, because that's going to dictate wherever your pressure is. Mm-hmm. So if you make your max pressure, let's just say, let's go 1250, which means
you should find a graph that actually has like all the numbers.
No, they don't. None of them do.
Stupid.
Otherwise, there'd be 5,000 lines here.
Not on the pressure side.
All right, well, let's just call this 1300 because it looks like that's where I'm at anyway. And then you'd have to pick where your gas cooler outlet temperature would be. So if you were to look at, I don't know, let's look at the magical PT chart.
Magical PT chart.
No, that's what it is. It's a magical PT chart, right? 1250.
Or TP, like the fucking guy I was with the other day kept saying, and it was irritating the shit out of me.
Oh, that's okay. By the way, it was 93 degrees. This one guy was bitching because he's like, yeah, they said they were doing on the class I went to, they said they were doing the PT chart, but it was actually a pH chart, and I was really confused. So anyway, so this would then run to about 93 degrees. So right somewhere right in the middle. Right now. So now that is now over here. So now just by doing that, that basically created more gas, more flash gas, right? So we're running transcritical, we're running higher pressure, and now we have more tax here. So now we have more vapor being created.
Yeah, because you have to drop the pressure more to make that 550. So if you ran it the other way, it's less energy.
The other weird thing about this, okay, so it's to a point, but then if you were to if you were to run this all the way up to, let's just say 1450, but then you start losing a little bit of efficiency with your compressor because you're running, because then you're running your compression ratio so much higher or whatever. Extend this line out because now also the fact that we're running even higher, that means our discharge temperature is going to be even higher. And so when you're at 1450, I just know this off the top of my head, it's 104 degrees. So 104 degrees.
Allegedly.
That's all
allegedly.
So now you get worse. So that's why like the certain manufacturers are running the subcooling loop and saying that it's more efficient because it is, right? If you could basically get this line off of here running at 104, and you could subcool that line all the way down to, let's just say, I think the set point was 60 on those alphabet ones that they have there. Now the XTE or ETE, it has a subcooler on here. Actually make it on the end of the chart.
You talking about like a legit subcooler or that
no, like an actual. No, this is what it looks like. They have a legitimate heat exchanger here running through here. So let's just say they can get it down to the 104, right? And then by the time that it's done being subcooled, they get it down to about, I think the set point was like 65 degrees or something like that. But then also now you're taking a little bit of energy off of here. As our favorite saying is, rob Peter to pay Paul, right? So then basically what they're doing is they're taking a little bit of the liquid that's coming out over yonder and then utilizing that to subcool this. And then it typically would go, they like having a parallel compressor for that because then one, you're running this off of that, you're running the flash tank off of the parallel compressor, and then you have less of a compression ratio. If that would be the case.
My only problem with that is once you get vapor in that line, you're pretty much, the subcooler is pretty much a condenser and it's pretty much screwed.
What do you mean?
So you can't subcool vapor.
I think I don't know how. So even in transcritical, right? Like they can bring that temperature down. Even if we're not guaranteed, it's still going to bring that temperature down. So it still lessened the amount of tax on here. But so for how much energy that it saved, you'd have to, I'm not that smart. I haven't gotten there yet, or I'd have to then figure out how much capacity, well, I guess you could figure it out. So if it came out to 104, I don't know how to take it from here, but basically 140 down to about 110. So I think that's what 30 BTUs per pound is basically what you'd have to figure out of what that would be. So is it worth the squeeze? Like for the amount of capacity that they're using, the 30 BTUs per pound to subcool this, was it worth how much savings that you got out of this?
I guess it would be a toss up on a bigger system, probably, but it's just like a subcooler. Think about it. When the subcooler doesn't have a full column of liquid, what's it do? Maxes out the valve, can't hit superheat, maxes out the valve, and it becomes a condenser basically.
But so I thought that too, but like everyone that tells me like when they do liquid injection, like on that one rack that our friend that was working on, where he was having a bunch of problems. He said that the guy I was talking, Vinen said the best thing would do is to run the liquid literally straight off of the line right before the HPV. He said you're still going to get a little bit of liquid there.
Yeah, that's the only way to do it in that case, because it was the same pressure.
Yes, it was. But my point is, if he's telling me that you can get liquid off of there in order to do it, I don't have, maybe I do have, I don't know. I can't find it readily available right now.
It wouldn't be the best quality liquid, put it that way.
Agreed. I totally agree with you. But my point is that I don't remember. I think I have the P&ID drawing of that somewhere. And so I don't remember if that was feeding off of the line from the actual flash tank itself, or if it was feeding basically the subcooler off of here. When I drew mine up, I basically drew it off the flash tank because I couldn't remember where it was bringing, which would make more sense. It'd be better capacity liquid, right?
Yeah, it would be definitely better capacity liquid. But my whole thing is, if it was running parallel compression, it would have to be coming off of the drop leg. Because if you're running parallel compression and you're using that parallel compression circuit to run the subcooler,
you wouldn't have the differential.
Correct. You wouldn't have a differential. You would have to use the main suction to run it, and then you lose the benefit there. So you need that differential. So you would have to have it coming off there. Do I think it would work? Yeah. Do I think it'd be the most efficient? Probably not. I think you get a little bit more out of desuperheating the discharge.
You can see it right here. That's essentially what you're doing, right? We're still in the Schrodinger's cat. We're still in that weird vapory, liquidy, vapor, plasma type crap up here. You know what I mean? And then if you were to bring this all the way down, so let's do a subcritical day. So now bring it down. Let's see. I don't know, 8. Oh, I'll do about 900 or so. And you can see the discharge temperature is going to go way down at that point, right? Because you basically lost your compression ratio. Oh, I was also told that you're supposed to do a little bit of drift. You can't go out on a straight line. You need a little bit of drift because there's a little bit of loss in energy from the heat, the friction, and all that other shit, by the way. And then this actually wouldn't be here anymore. It would be within the dome. And then this line would go, yeah. This line would go here. Pretty. So you have less text than we were. So this is where it's doing the least amount. You probably got 20% vapor being created and 70% liquid being created, or 80% liquid being created at this point. The closer you get it over to here, the better off you get as far as how you, because you still are going to get flashing because you still have that HPV basically dropping down that pressure. Now, I wonder if you wouldn't even need it. If you could get because what would happen at one point, this would just open all the way, balls open, and then drop all the way down to whatever minimum flash tank pressure that you'd have, right?
So that's my thing. Why not? Everybody's like, you can't do that. You need a differential. Why not?
No, why can't you do that? It would actually be.
My only thing is, I don't think a lot of these are sized properly and with enough turn down to not have the flash gas bypass valve there for load.
Yeah, see, we talked about this one day, though. Like, one of the things that you'd have to do is treat this almost as a holdback valve, right? Where you can't just because at one point you have a minimum saturated or minimum pressure, minimum saturated condensing temperature on your gas cooler fans, right? But you also have a minimum pressure on your
HPV.
On your HPV. So you'd have to probably turn these off before and just let the HPV basically be the holdback valve at that point.
So the whole thing with this, like, you're going to hit a point eventually where fan horsepower and compressor horsepower cave over each other. Obviously, when it's cold, super cold, you're not going to hit that point. You're going to be able to do it with using less fan horsepower. You'd have to look at that fine line because usually like 70 degrees and any lower to 70, like end up, depending on what it is, you start using more KW and fan horsepower than you're saving in compressor horsepower.
As it stands, if you look at this, here's your saturation line again, right? So we're just a hair above 60 degrees saturated. That would be like a 55 degree day. Agreed?
Yeah.
So on a 55-degree day, especially in Chicago there where it's windy as shit, you have the adiabatics, which are standing up anyway. They're going to catch all that wind anyway. That's probably going to be able to get your fans totally, completely off. Yes?
Somewhat. Or,
Depends.
barely
Really?
running.
But at least with this way, right? Maybe they got the Gutners on there where they shut off the banks of fans where you just have that first bank on, just running just a bare minimum percentage of them.
That's the biggest load of crap I've seen with all the gas coolers is the inability to cycle fans.
What do you mean?
Not sending gas coolers out with EC motors with the ability to cycle the motors off individually.
They do on the Gooners though. I just don't know.
LLCM mode, but it doesn't work if it's not. You have to have a super stable signal, which none of them do. None of them are stable enough for the LLCM to work. So you have to have a super stable signal to it for the LLCM to work. Now, it'd be better off with DIs telling it, hey, fan bank 1, fan bank 2, fan bank 3. You would be so much more efficient and wear out motors so much less and do so much less damage to coils and valves and everything else if you could just cycle the fans off and run one bank of fans in the winter at 60 to 70%, then 6 bank of fans just on off. Subcooling, no subcooling.
I know. Have you ever talked to Will about, because he's been super busy because he's like the only technical support guy. Have you talked to Will lately about if you could turn that up a little bit, like 11% seems really low. If maybe you could do 15, 20%.
For what, the minimum?
Yeah.
I want it to be lower, like 5%. I want it to go super slow.
No, but I'm saying as far as getting getting it to actually stage off some fans, because I think once you get it staged down to where it's just running maybe 4 instead of 6, I think you still have that problem because it just has a hard time initially shutting those.
I think
off.
they need to ditch it, and now everybody's doing integrations. I think the integration needs to tell it, hey, fan bank 1 shut off, fan bank 2 shut off, fan bank 3 shut off.
Oh, just like a certain pressure.
Yeah, gas cooler should be control of pressure, not temperature. And we should just be cycling off of pressure and getting it stable, and just keeping it stable and letting the fans do its thing and ditching banks of fans. I'm even a fan of ditching banks of fans on OA temp, and then have a backup if the pressure gets high, they come on. But as the OA goes down 50 degrees, ditch bank. 30 degrees bank.
E2 had the SS and SSVS.
But that was always, it worked, but like sometimes it got like janky. Like it would lock the drive and then start cycling fans. I would like a much more staggered approach, like where it's
use like a loop sequencer to stage shit off. Sprouts does that.
Yeah, but I'm talking like off temperature, like outdoor temp.
That's what I mean. You could set the loop sequencer to basically start staging off fans once the temperature got down. Like it doesn't. We don't have to do it off of pressure. The pressure could be a backup. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the pressure is a backup, but
whatever's greater, right? If the pressure is greater or the whatever the ambient. But what I'm saying is you can do a loop sequencer that not just does an analog output signal or a bipolar stepper, but you can do it a staged output.
Yeah, it's what do they call it? I forget what the fuck it's called. It's a staging program.
You can do it though.
Yeah, you can do it, but like that's how I'd much rather control the fans and let it be more linear and let the fans run a higher VS percentage with less fans. It's going to be more efficient. It's going to be better all around, and it's going to make your gas cooler control so much better, and your actual flash gas control so much better. Wiring all the fans together is the biggest load of crap that the whole industry was sold. It's got to cost $600 to change it, from buying a condenser. You're already about to buy the AO point. What's another couple board points?
Yeah. When we did that, when they were doing all the VFD, they were putting VFDs on all the condenser fan motors on the East Coast. When I was out there, I was up in Connecticut. They had a VFD for each set of banks, but unfortunately, I don't remember if they used. They might have been still using the contactors, which I know is like a no. But what they could have done is just ran a relay that killed the analog output for that, or at least killed the I'm sorry. Do a relay output on there, because the relay out there was still up there anyway. Excuse me, and just kill the enable.
So I rewire every VS condenser we do if it is a non spec customer. If we're changing condensers out, I rewire them to individually cycle the fan motors.
Yeah.
And what I'll do is I'll take 10 volts and put it on the normally open.
Mhm.
I'll put the signal that's running the fans on normally closed, and I'll wire the fan motor signal to common. So when the relay shuts off, it puts 10 volts at it and shuts the motor down. When the relay's calling for the fan to be on, it's running off the fan signal. I rewire them all like that, and they get so much better control.
So you're cutting the AO?
I'm cutting the AO and then sending it to 10 volts full.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So I'll wire, and then if it's Danfoss, I'll just take the 12 volts off the board and run it to the AO or to the relay. And then I'll just take 12 volts from the input board and put it on there and use that to shut the ECE motors off. I've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
And zero issues.
What's the difference? What's the difference between doing that and doing the just killing the enable?
These are EC motors. They have no enable.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
You're talking about the MPAPS ones?
Yeah. So we'll order a condenser with 10 MPAPs on it, and I'll set them up to cycle.
Okay. All right.
Normally they're all wired together, and the control sucks. It doesn't matter what you do with it. It's bad control, because you got, even if you're split and you got one side off, you still got 5 MPAPS motors ripping. And those things don't take very much to move some air.
Got some heavy, hefty blades on those things.
Oh,
man.
chop your hand off.
Worse than the Milwaukee cutter. Oh, man. Hey, I'm going to be in Seattle soon. I think it's November 11th. I'm going to be teaching 5 classes up at the NASRC.
I'll be in nowhere's Ohio there. Then
Really?
yeah, I'm going to be stuck in the Ohio-Kentucky border.
Awesome.
Yeah. So great. Ohio's great. Love it.
You're such a jerk. On that note, before we lose any more listeners from Ohio or Kentucky, I guess we'll talk to you guys later.
Take it easy.
Bye.